I've been talking a lot about colostrum this year, and being, I know I play the role in our community often as like a kind of a controversial character, bringing things in that people are like, oh, I thought we didn't do that. And I brought colostrum to the marketplace because when you study a little bit about colostrum, it's like, wow, this is really maybe the most complete superfood that exists on Earth. How do I bring that to a vegan community? I was like, oh no. And a lot of of you have come up to my table, asked me questions like, and really, really intelligent questions, and I know you're thinking people, and I want to address just a few of the things that have come up. One of the questions is like, Daniel, it's colostrum from cows, and we're people. Is it good for people? And so who's had that kind of a question? Maybe if you thought about that a little bit yourself, and maybe you want to know about that. So here's the kind of thing, if you do a little Google search, you find stuff like this. I think that's really funny. Sorry, I know that's kind of gross, but please laugh at that. That's really funny. So that's the kind of thing. I'm not going to leave it on there. That's gross. All right, so that's the kind of thing. So people are like, wouldn't we do better on human colostrum? And I was like, well, I'm going to try to get that happening. but I can't. I can't do that, right? So I just want to answer that question. I want to talk a little bit about how dairy products have come into our lives real quick, because right now dairy products are getting like a really, really dark reputation in the health food world, and a lot of people have really turned against them. And if you remember when we were kids, milk was like the uber health food. It did a body good. And today, it's kind of the opposite, and there's a lot of reasons. I think, I was talking to people about, people were saying, I don't think this is a food we should use. It's too mucus forming. It's too, what about this? What about that? And I was saying that to look at the modern way that we've had this stuff, the milk we grew up on was really pus-filled, injected with genetically modified hormone. It was factory farm. It was grain-fed. It came from weak animals with weird mutated genetics, and it was making us sick. There's no question. But you know that saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater? I've kind of been saying to people, it's sort of like when I found out genetically modified corn existed, I didn't decide to stop eating vegetables. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, clap for a second. I would never, I'm not suggesting people go to the supermarket and pick up, trying to get from the factory farming world their foods. But I want to say that dairy products have been with us now for about 8,000 years. 8,000 years. And you know that the only place that scientists have accepted that in our genetics our food has changed us is around dairy food. But it's not for everybody, and I want to be clear about that. So let's set the record straight. 8,000 years ago, some agriculturalists in certain parts of the world, I'm going to skip those. In some parts of the world, in these red zones, began consuming dairy products. They began raising animals and consuming dairy products. That for those people was an evolutionary advantage. And those people are mutants today. Please put your hand up if you are lactose intolerant. For sure, you know you are. All right, everybody hold your hand up if you are that person. I want everyone to look around. And it's actually a very small percentage of us, right? Those are the normal people. If you can digest milk like I can, put your hand up in the air. We are mutants. Here's what I mean. We have a gene has been activated that causes something called lactose persistence. That means that the part of us that can digest milk when we're children, because our moms give us milk, has persisted in us into adulthood. For some people, particularly people who come out of that red zone, and the dark purple zone are people with the least ability to digest milk, and the spot with the red zone, people have the most ability to. If you come from those red zones, it's likely that you have a fair amount of tolerance to lactose. Now, I just want to be clear, things like colostrum, things like dairy, they might not be for you. And that's totally okay, but for some people, they really do work. So some people, oh, milk is really mucousy, milk is like really bad for digestion. I think people are making really big blanket statements, and it's fair to know, hey, there's 8,000 years of history, and we can't blame a whole bunch of recent epidemiological problems on something that has 8,000 years of history. Does that make sense? It's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And we know tribal people like the Maasai warriors. Anyone ever seen the Maasai warriors in Africa? These are guys who can jump 6 feet in the air, right? And they hunt lions with spears. Very powerful people. And milk's formed a very important part of their diet for a very long time, and they're very healthy people. And they don't have a lot of those diseases that we've been blaming on milk in the last few generations in the health food world. So I just put that out there to say I think it's a really valuable food, and I think we should look at, since we are stewarding cows, I talked the other day about how the animal that gave rise to the cow, does anyone remember what it was called? The aurochs. The aurochs is an extinct animal today. Now we have cows, and we don't have the animal cows came from, and now we are responsible for the last genetics of the cows. And what do we do with that? In India, the cow is sacred. It's holy. One of the reasons it's holy is because it produces colostrum. We produce colostrum too, right? Colostrum is the first food for every single mammal. Your first food, nature's first food for you, was meant to be colostrum because you're a mammal. So your mother, before she ever produced any milk from her mammary gland, first thing she produced was what? Doesn't mean you got any, does it? You might have. You might have. You might not have. You might have gotten to breastfeed even, but maybe didn't get the colostrum because she's only producing it for a short time, like maybe about a day. And maybe some of us spent some time in incubators, and we might not have got that, even if we breastfed later. Or some of us didn't get breastfed at all. Can you believe there was a time in history where mothers were told that breastfeeding was inferior to soy formula? Can you believe that? Wait, check this out. Not just soy formula in tap water. In a bottle with a BPA-laden plastic liner that they would microwave. And what's even crazier is that a whole generation of moms, or a huge percentage of that generation, bought into that story. And so there was like a break in the health of a generation. And we are seeing the repercussions of it now. So it turns out that all mammals produce colostrum, and they all produce it for different periods of time. Colostrum is not milk. Want to get clear about that. If you're a dairy farmer and you go to dairy farms and you get colostrum, especially what we call the first 6-hour colostrum from cows, the first milking comes out. Has anyone ever seen it? It's dark. What color? It's yellow. The next time they milk the cow, it's yellow stuff floating on a little milk. And the next time, it's more milk, less colostrum. And that's called transitional milk, right? It's a different stuff. Milk is produced in the breast. Colostrum's produced in the blood. Now, here's what colostrum's like. I bought a new MacBook recently, that one. When I got that, the hard drive was like blank. It's unformatted, right? And you get the little discs, and you got to put them in, you got to format your computer. When you're born, your immune system is unformatted. You've been in a sterile bubble, right, inside your mom. And you didn't need anything like that. And what happens is you actually get formatted when you come out and you start drinking the colostrum. And colostrum is loaded with antibodies to all the viruses the animal's ever seen or been exposed to, or your mother's ever seen or been exposed to. And for a long time, it was thought that that was what was giving the immune advantage that you get from colostrum. Now we know it's some really misunderstood, confusing kind of subject. They call it transfer factor. Anyone heard about that? Did David mention that yesterday? Transfer factor, it's kind of like, by the way, when you call something a factor, it means we don't really know what it is. Regardless, we know that colostrum, by the way, this is me just out of a colostrum farm. You ever seen a mason jar that big? It's pretty cool, right? That's me super happy. It's kind of, one of the questions people have, and this is another obvious question because a lot of people here, and myself included, really care about animals and how the experience that animals are having and if we're affecting them in a negative way. So people ask, if you take colostrum, what about the calf? That's an obvious question. If you've ever thought about that question, will you clap so I know that you're thinking about that? So one of the interesting things about breeding an auroch would have produced about the amount of milk that its child needed and about the amount of colostrum that its child needed. When we breed things, kind of like when we bred broccoli, we made broccoli produce a whole lot more flour than it really needs. And cows have been bred to produce a whole lot more than they need. And so what happens is when a dairy farmer, and when I say dairy farmer, by the way, I'm talking about the small, healthy, happy farms. I'm not talking about big agri. When they get the colostrum, they have so much that they have like surplus that they try to get rid of. If you don't give the colostrum to the calf, I want you to know what happens. The calf's going to die. You can't just like take all the colostrum away from the calf. It will die. Why will it die? It'll have no immune system. Make sense? When you when you drink it, all of the immune factors. So I say that, by the way, just to close up that thought, that you can't deprive it. You can't deprive it, or you won't be able to get a future production of colostrum. Does that make sense? Even if the farmer wanted to try to deprive it, he would be cutting himself off at the foot, if that makes sense. We are now understanding that colostrum might be the most powerful immune food that exists. This is how powerful. This is just a bit from a study. And it's that last part that I want you to see, that I underlined there. Colostrum, both in healthy subjects and high. This, by the way, came from PubMed. PubMed's the most prestigious medical journal. Colostrum, both in healthy subjects and high-risk cardiovascular patients, is at least 3 times more effective than vaccination to prevent flu, and is very cost-effective. Isn't it really neat that during that whole H1N1 swine flu, bird flu, mosquito West Nile flu virus situation, no one ever talked about this? The medical journal says it's how many times more effective than vaccines? 3. You go to the airport, you can get injected with a vaccine that's totally experimental and might contain mercury. No one's talking about colostrum. It's cheaper, it's safer, it's ecologically sound, it's more effective, and it tastes really good. By the way, I really want the women here to know about this. I've been telling people that you can put this stuff on your skin, and it's regenerative. And what I tell people, men, you can do this too, but women like this stuff a little more usually. I say, take a little of the powder and mix it with water and spread it on your face, and it'll dry in a minute, and go to sleep. And when you wake up the next day, brush it off, and look how much your skin's glowing, because there are actual growth factor proteins that go to work on your skin. That woman had burns all over her face, and she used colostrum topically. What do you think of that? Is that impressive? Yeah. Can you clap for that? That's really cool. All right, so anyway, I got some assistants here in the room. Where are you guys? I just want to know you're close by. I'm going to show you guys a little bit about how I'm working with it. One of the reasons I really like colostrum is, for me, I'd been on a really strict vegetarian protocol for a really long time. And when I wanted to start shifting into some foods that I thought might contain a little bit more, maybe B12, maybe a little bit more of the fat-soluble vitamins, maybe something that had some of the fats that I know are contained in animal products, I wanted something that I felt really good about, and something that was easy to transition into. And so that's why I started using colostrum. All right.